Okay, that should work.
Right.
Elliot, please, will you make me a co-host?
Is that Abby?
Yeah,
Oh.
it is. Thank you.
Should be good now.
Tell you, they never had this trouble in temple times. So let's come back to, can you hear me? Something right, okay. Well, I think we're cooking with gas. Thank you very much, Elliot. Okay, so we come back to this question of what is a yoke? Sorry, Danny, can I ask you to say again, where are you? There you are, Danny. Can you say again what you said?
Dare I? The yoke is the thing that connects the animal to whatever it's pulling, like a plow. I think that's my understanding. So it's our connection to Judaism. So I say it as don't break the connection that we have to the community. Right.
Sorry, I'm not. Let me say this to ask the farmers amongst you. If you're ploughing and you only have one animal, do you still need a yoke?
The farmers.
The reason I ask is because yes, Leslie. Unmute yourself.
Yes, my understanding is that it's for controlling the animal and it's pejorative. It's a burden, the yoke.
Right, okay, so it's quite interesting is Leslie's introduced that other sense in which we use the word yoke, which is as something, some sort of burden, because I think,
sorry, it's not a burden, it's a machine, it's an implement that gives traction. It enables the animal to draw the burden, whatever it might be.
That's interesting, but I guess I always understood it that you ploughed, if you're ploughing with one animal, you wouldn't need a yoke, but what the yoke did was to control more than one animal and keep them, as it were, on the straight and narrow, rather than if you had more than one animal, to prevent them sort of wandering off each in their own particular direction.
But you yoke the animal to the plough as well. Yes, right. You can have two animals in a yoke. You can have a two yoke.
Yeah, but a harness would do that.
A harness.
Well, I know, but I think there's a different. Let's not spend the whole session on the agriculture of it.
The yoke is what you put over the animal's neck.
Right. Okay. But I guess the point I'm making is that I'm understanding yoke as something that's actually that is in a sense burdensome. It sort of controls the animal. It gives them the direct. It prevents them wandering off. I know Miriam and Marilyn wanted. Miriam, yes.
Well, also, I always think it's sort of something to do with enslavement. The animal has no choice over this. It's being forced into this. And actually, human beings have been known to pick up the yoke. So I presume they do need it to do a straight line. But there's another sort of side of it, to the side of enslavement, I think.
Right, it's interesting because that is another way in which we see visually, we see yokes, people yoked. So I don't know if you can see my arms, but to some sort of beam which holds them and restrains them. Marilyn, you wanted to?
Yes, I had a bit of a problem reconnecting, so forgive me if someone's already said something along these lines. I was thinking that really yoking animals together, it kind of promotes the idea that collectivity promotes more strength than one animal or person alone. So this concept that the collective is stronger, can be stronger than the individual.
Right, that's interesting. You've obviously been listening to Josh's sermon, because that's very much part of what I guess what he was trying to say, talk about that that interconnectedness. Okay, so there are a number of ideas floating around then, quite what the function of a yoke might be, how it's working, and the different ways in which we understand the word yoke. But I mean, it seems to me all of them have something to do with control in some way, controlling and directing and guiding and so on. Okay, I'm slightly aware of time, so I've brought together 3 texts. Before we go on to the text, again then, what is the yoke that the Al-Khayt is talking about us breaking? I guess that's my question. That's what drew me to this particular stanza of the Al-Khayt. And it's quite interesting, those 3 very different ways in which it's translated. The traditional mahzor, of course, not really, well, we'll come to what the yoke might be in Jewish teaching, but certainly how in the progressive world we've translated this particular one is quite interesting. So, okay, let's go into the text at the bottom of the first page from Pirkei Avot, Pirkei, Perek, again, a chapter, a separate section in a book. So Rav Nechunya ben Hakana Omer, Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana said, whoever takes, let's hear it in the Hebrew, Kol hamakabel alav ol Torah. So I've backlit the use of the word ol in each case. Kol hamakabel alav ol Torah. Anyone who takes upon them, so who receives the yoke of the Torah, ma'avirin mimenu ol malchut v'ol derech eretz. So casts off themselves the ol malchut, the yoke, translated here, the yoke of the government, but the yoke of kingship, of authority, the ol derech eretz, and the yoke of worldly concerns. I can't remember which translation this is from for derech eretz, literally the way of the land. So what are we understanding by the yoke of the Torah? Yes, Brenda.
Is it the responsibilities that come within the Torah?
Right. Okay. Any other thoughts about what the old Torah might be? Okay. So then, if we take upon ourselves the responsibilities of Torah, how are we removing from that? So what is the Ol Malchut? The yoke of the government. Is that those people who are protesting in Trafalgar Square about not wanting the COVID restrictions? Is that what's being rejected? And what is the old derech eretz? Literally the way of the land. Derech eretz. How do you understand derech eretz? Is that a phrase familiar or from?
It's an unusual translation, isn't it? Because derech eretz usually means respect and that sort of thing.
Interesting, right?
Custom of the land.
Sorry.
It's the customs and traditions of the land.
Well, I mean,
the law.
It's literally the way of the land. I think, Danny, where do you know that from, Danny, when you say respect? Would you say it's like one of your parents saying to you,
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, exactly. Show some derech eretz. Yeah. So do the right thing. Be a mensch, do the right thing. Behave like other human beings.
Right, okay. Derech Eretz, in the 19th century, Samson Raphael Hirsch, who was the sort of, whose ideology, I guess, gave rise to, well, either the United Synagogue branch of Judaism or conservative Judaism, he coined the phrase, what is it to be a Jew, is Torah im Derech Eretz. And there he's clearly not using it quite in the sense of respect, but something about, yeah, Leslie.
Well, I think he may be using it in terms of respect, respecting the customs of the land.
Yeah, I suspect that's not how he was using it.
This is B'nai Akiva, isn't it? That's where I got it from. I just realised.
Oh, that's B'nai Akiva. That's, yeah. And how was it how did they explain it there? So Torah, what was the Derech Eretz bit in that motto?
Yeah, this is a really good question. It is. Well, I think it's doing your civil duty.
Ah, okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, because I think that's how Hirsch was using it. You know, live by Torah, but also remember that you are a citizen of the land in which you're living. I mean, it's very interesting. Apparently, somebody came to visit Samson Raphael Hirsch and kept his hat on when he was in the house, because he thought that was he was in a religious man's house. And apparently Hirsch said to him, take your hat off, you know, you're not out in the street now. So it's quite interesting. So maybe it's that sense, but would that fit here in that, how is Derech Eretz being used in Pirkei Avot then?
But also, isn't this what he's saying there in Pirkei Avot at odds with what Jeremiah said about respecting the government of the country that you're in?
Okay. Remember, Pirkei Avot was composed in Roman times, and other. So there was a very difficult relationship with Roman authority. So elsewhere in Pirkei Avot, you're warned, don't get too close to the government, because they, you know, when they want you, when you're useful to them, they're very friendly. But when you're no longer useful to them, they cast you out. And it's you know, sort of getting close, sort of cozying up to the government is a bit like getting too close to a fire. You get burned, or it's like a wild animal. But also the Pirkei Avot says, like Jeremiah, pray for the peace of the government, because without the government, people would eat each other up alive. So it's a very, very conflicted relationship that Pirkei Avot advises us to have with the government. So this is just one saying. It's always the difficult of just pulling out one saying from a larger tract of teaching. Brenda.
This whole conversation reminds me of the yeshiva bochers, the people who spend their time praying and really don't take much notice of the government or their responsibilities to anything else but to what they want to do. And somehow we were discussing it before, it sort of lost exactly the connection, but that's what it reminds me of. So people are just doing, well, they are under the yoke of Torah maybe, and they don't take any notice of anything else around them, but they do what they feel is the right thing to do, which is study all day long. They don't seem to have responsibility for anything else.
You could argue that in Israel, they privilege Torah above government, whereas, say, modern Orthodoxy would be like Hirsch. They would balance the two together, and you do your civil duty. You say serve in the army at the same time as being religious.
Yes, but they don't, do they?
Okay, well, let's not go down that path, but I understand what you're saying. And what's if we come back to the Pirkei Avot, what's the sort of the other side of it? So in the third line, v'chol, so whoever takes upon themselves the yoke of Torah, somehow sort of removes from themselves, quite what that might mean, the yoke of government, and the yoke of worldly concerns is also another way of translating it. And the Pirkei Avot often works like this on the one hand, and on the other, v'chol haporek mimenu ol Torah, and whoever separates themselves off from the yoke of Torah, notnim alav ol malchut v'ol derech eretz, and sort of takes upon themselves the yoke of government, which is still very unclear, and the yoke of worldly concerns, which is even less clear than it was in the first part of the, what does it mean that we just get so caught up in material, irrelevant concerns in life, and then forget what are the broader issues in life? That may be what they're saying. So the word ol is being used there. And any other reflections? I mean, again, it's not clear at all how ol is being used there, quite what is meant by yoke. So I'm still unclear about what the yoke is. Because if the yoke is, as I was saying earlier, something that restrains animals, that stops them wandering off the straight and narrow, as it were, the path that the ploughman wants them to follow, then and that clearly is one view, and one very traditional view of what Torah is. What is the function of Torah? Is to keep us on the religious straight and narrow, whatever that, however we might understand what the religious straight and narrow is. And we, whatever part of the Jewish world we're in, I guess we would say something like, well, the purpose of religious life, of the Ol Torah, is to actually give us guidance about how we live our lives, how we organize our week, our time, how we organize our relationships with each other, relationships between Bein Adam Lechavero, between us and our fellow human beings, and between us and God. Bein Adam Lemakom, the sort of the two, the sort of horizontal, as I always go, the horizontal in religious life and the vertical, but not, I don't want you to think I'm going like that. But certainly that's the two levels of relationship that Torah and Jewish teaching and Jewish law are looking at, about how we live with each other and what our relationship with God is about. Okay, so let's go on. And this little section from Berachot, so the first tractate of the Talmud, Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha said, and this is really looking at what's the order of the Shema. The first paragraph of the Shema, V'ahavta, comes from, any authors? This is putting anybody on the spot, comes from the book of Deuteronomy. And the second paragraph also comes from the book of Deuteronomy, and the third paragraph, about tzitzit, is from the book of Numbers. So this little bit of midrash, of rabbinic commentary, is looking at, because what would we would expect the order to be, to follow the order of the books in the Torah. So the first part of the Shema should be the book from the book of Numbers, and then the other two from the book of Deuteronomy. So so it's not in the what Yehoshua ben Korah suggests not in the sort of natural order in which they come in the Tanakh. So hence his question, why does the parasha of Shema come before the parasha of V'haya'im Shema, which is the beginning of the second paragraph of the Shema? So he asks the question, and at the end of the second line in the Hebrew, Kadesh Yikabel Alav, once again, Ol Malchut, not Ol Malchut, but Ol Malchut Shamayim Techila. So he should take, so that one should take upon oneself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. So it's a very standard phrase, Ol Malchut Shamayim Techila. You should take that on first, and hence that's why we say the V'ahavta first, because that really is what is in that first paragraph of the Shema is really a sort of encapsulation of Judaism. We've got about loving God, about repeating these words, about teaching our children, the next generation, and the last two parts about tefillin and mezuzah. So some sort of practical applications of these words, which the Shema talks about. And of course, when should we say them? We should say them morning and evening, and so on. So that's the sort of the rationale for why the Shema, the 3 paragraphs begin with that one. And then after that, the beginning of the 4th line in the Hebrew, V'achar kach, and after that, Mekabel alav ol mitzvot. And after that, you should take upon yourself the yoke of the mitzvot. And that I think, I suppose I've always been fascinated, I guess, by the phrase ol mitzvot, because using it's an unusual word to use. For me, it feels unusual to put yoke and mitzvot side by side into the same phrase. So to talk about the yoke of the commandments, because I think it recognizes, I think there's a very real recognition there that the mitzvot can seem burdensome. And it can seem like a sort of heavy weight on our shoulders. So there's no sort of pretense that this is easy, or though of course in the Torah reading this afternoon, we'll talk about it's not in the heaven that you should say, and it's not beyond the mountains. But I think there's the recognition on the part of the rabbis by using this phrase ol mitzvot, that actually religious life isn't always easy. And it can sometimes feel burdensome. And I'm sure wherever you are in the Jewish world, if you're living somehow by Torah, there is a sense of it somehow feeling sometimes burdensome and quite difficult. So what's the order then? You begin with the Ol Malchut Shamayim. You recognize, as in the first 2 or 3 lines of the Shema, you recognize the authority of the Malchut Shamayim. Then you take upon yourself the yoke of the mitzvot, which very much is what that second paragraph is talking about. Because what's it saying? What's it saying in the second paragraph? If you follow the commandments, then you will have good harvests, and the rain will come in its season, and so on. So it's suggesting that following the path of Torah will bring good fortune to you, but you will have a good life. And then it continues. And why does V'haya'im Shamoah come before Vayomer Adonai Moshe, the beginning of the 3rd paragraph? Because why? V'haya'im Shamoah, you say both day and night. Yeah, it's practiced both day and night, in other words, all the time, while Vayomer is only practiced during the day. What does that mean? Why? In what way is the 3rd paragraph of the Shema only practiced during the day? For which last night what was special about last night in terms of what we do? Danny is holding up the
Yeah,
talit.
yeah, you wear a talit. Yeah.
You wear talit. It's the one time in the Jewish year that you wear talit. So the one time in the year where the mitzvah of talit is practiced, of tzitzit is practiced at night time and not just in the daytime. So this is sort of Korcha's, I think quite cute, sort of cute way of explaining the order in which we find the 3 paragraphs of the Shema. But also, why have I brought it in? Partly because it's quite cute, but also because I think it introduces these phrases Ol Malchut Shamayim and Ol Mitzvot, which are such sort of standard phrases in Jewish teaching. Any comment or reflection or thoughts about that? Right. Okay, and the third, the second section on this page is probably where we're most familiar with the word Ol, in the second paragraph of the Aleinu. We should all bow down and be humble. Honor and glory of your being. Vikablu chulam in the 5th line, et ol malchutecha. All shall accept the duty of building your kingdom. So ol here is being translated as duty. And what is building the Ol Malchut? What is building your kingdom? How are you understanding that?
Not to be tikkun olam.
Well, that's why we often it's often linked with tikkun olam. And how would you define tikkun olam?
Building or completing the world, so helping to, but I mean, essentially, doing good deeds in the world is again, it's a bit like civil duty.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And as a word, tikkun is
well, repair technically, isn't it?
It's about repairing or correcting or putting right. Yes, David.
And can I link that back to the previous discussion about the yoke of the mitzvot? Because although the yoke may be heavy on us, someone who's ploughing is actually making the land better. And so I could link that into that last discussion about tikkun olam.
Right. Okay. We're getting agricultural again. Yes. Right. Okay. And again, I guess the sense of yoke as being directive in some way, of pointing us in a particular direction and suggesting that's the path to be following. Leslie, did you wave your hand, or was that just a...
I did. I just wondered, in my mind, building your kingdom is assembling the bricks, people by people, good deed by good deed, until the community acts as one.
Right. Okay. I think that's very nice. Yeah. Yeah. So if we come back to the al-Khait at the beginning, so what is the sin that this line of al-Khait is talking about? What are we doing according to Bifrikat Ol, that it should be seen as worthy of being included in this litany of wrongdoing? I guess that's the question that brought me to this particular line. How are we to understand? Is it just is it and do we like the reform and the liberal translations of this, defying the moral law, I'm actually looking at them both. I'm not sure that I don't prefer the denying our religious duty.
I was going to say the liberal translation is best, because the reform version is sort of making a big deal about separating moral law from ritual law, which is a kind of reform thing, isn't it, in history, perhaps.
Well, it's also a liberal thing, but for me, in the context, I think I prefer the liberal translation to the one we've got in our Machzor. I shall speak to our Machzor committee as we're in the process of redoing the Machzor. So see what they've done with the free cut on. Well, it's 10 to 1. I think it's probably time to draw to a close. So thank you very much for being here. I hope the rest of the day is a som kal. You have a light fast. Some people have been saying som is normally spelled Z-O-M. So some people have been saying, may this year be a Zoom kal. Bad joke. So thank you very much. I hope the rest of the day goes well and smoothly for you. And let's hope, and I guess let's pray that next year we don't have to meet like this on Yom Kippur on Zoom. But
it's nice interacting.
Let's not hold our breath. Right.
Thank you
very much. Thanks.
Hello.
Thank you.